Hello everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to a new playthrough on the channel. After we wrapped the winter campaign earlier this week, we're going to take a small break from the Cthulhu mythos as we step back into a game we've played on the channel before. We're going to play Aeon's End again today. As you may recall, in this game we're playing Breach Mages defending our hometown of Gravehold from the Nameless. We win if we manage to defeat or outlast our boss enemy, and we lose if we get defeated or if Gravehold does. But that's the short version of it anyway. With that, let's jump up and go meet our nemesis for today first. Here's our nemesis for today, the Carapace Queen. Now, we started against Rageborn back. We played against Rageborn back in October. Link to that video will be in the description down below for reference purposes. Anyway, let's take a look at the Carapace Queen. So when we see Unleash this time, we put 2 husks into play, which will be on the husk track, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Actually, let's talk about the husk track right now. So when Carapace Queen swarms, and that's the keyword we need to be watching out for this time, is swarm, we count the number of husks in play and resolve the following. If we have 0 to 3 husks in play, we put 4 more into play. At 4 to 6, any player discards a prepped spell, and we place another 2 husks into play. 7 through 10, Gravehold suffers 5 damage. 11 to 12, the player with the lowest life suffers 3 damage, then discard a husk. 13 plus, the players lose. So we really need to keep these husks under control. But we also need to take a look at the additional rules. So each husk that we have on the husk track is a minion with 1 life. When a husk is placed into play, place it in the next available space on the husk track. When a player deals damage to a husk, that player may suffer 1 damage to distribute the damage dealt over multiple husks. And when Carapace Queen has 15 or more husks, has 15 husks in play, and must place another into play, Gravehold suffers 1 damage instead. So almost the husk directly goes and deals with Gravehold. So basically what we need to have happen here is we need to have as little damage as possible come out of the Nemesis deck. That might be harder to do, but as we see, the Carapace Queen also starts off with 60 life. So that's everything we need to know about our Nemesis today, the Carapace Queen. Now let's go meet the mages who are trying to defend Gravehold from the Nameless. Here's our first mage that we're going to be using, a mage named Nyrisia. Now, remember how I warned about spoilers, about very light spoilers for Aeon's End Legacy? The spoiler here is that for those of you who might be currently working through Aeon's End Legacy, you'll be able to use the mage you're building when the campaign's over. You'll also be able to take on most of the nemesis again and use the market, some of which we are today, as you'll see when we look at the market, and some of the nemesis cards, some of which might be in the nemesis deck. We won't know what's in the nemesis deck until we start going through it. But anyway, let's go ahead and go through Nyrisia. You can see her starting breach, composition. She starts off with 1 open, her 2 and 3 breaches are both two turns from being open. Her 4 breach is 3 turns from being open. So you might remember you can either spend the focus cost in the middle or spend the open cost up here to open it outright. So we can keep that in mind. But anyway, let's take a look at Nyrisia. So for her special abilities, first up, Nyrisia has her Dark Blessing. So once per turn during your main phase, you may discard a card in hand. If you do, deal 1 damage. Then her Rage of the Sith, once per turn when you focus or open a breach, deal 2 damage. Then her special ability when she has 6 charges, she can activate Netherlord's Wrath. Cast any player's prepped spell without discarding it. That spell deals 1 additional damage, and any player returns a spell in their discard pile to their hand. So you're seeing a lot of World of Warcraft and Star Wars: The Old Republic references there. Nyrisia is a character name that I've had in both of those games. She was a Sith Marauder there in Star Wars: The Old Republic, and my Warlock from World of Warcraft. But anyway, we'll take a quick look at Nyrisia's opening hand, including her special card. So she starts off with a Spark, 3 crystals, which are ether in this game, and then her special spell, Nyrisia's Fury. So when you cast it, you deal 1 damage and gain an ether that you can only use to get a spell, and you gain a charge. So that's a free way to pump up Nyricia's hand, or a free way to pump up Nyricia's special ability. Anyway, that will do it for Nyrisia. She also has the player 1 icon, so when player 1 comes up from the turn order deck, that's who we'll be going to. Anyway, that will do it for Nyrisia. Now, let's go meet her partner today. Nyricia's partner for today against the Carapace Queen, as she was in the Aeon's End Legacy campaign when I went through this with these two, is a mage named Solidia. So you can see we've got the same composition of breaches here. Solidia's special ability, first up we have Vengeful Shadows. When you cast 2 or more spells during your casting phase, gain 1 ether. Then for Power Word Silence, once per turn during your main phase, you may discard a card in hand. If you do, silence a minion. I don't think silence came up when we played through this against Rageborn, but what silence does is if a minion has a persistent effect with it, and you silence the minion, the persistent effect will not go off. The silence ability will just come off when it comes time to resolve the persistent ability on the minion. And then Solidia's special ability for 6 charges is Will of the High Priestess. Activate during your main phase. We also activate Netherlord's Wrath during the main phase. Gain a spell from any supply pile. You may place that spell into any ally's hand, and any ally gains 2 charges. So she'll be mostly buffing Nyrisia from the looks of it. But anyway, that will do it for our Magi. Now let's go take a look at our market. We're not quite ready to head over and check out the market yet because we still have to look at Solidia's opening hand. So just like Nyrisia, she's got a Spark and 3 crystals, but then we have Solidia's Spark that we get to look at as well. So on cast, deal 1 damage. If your discard pile contains 4 or more other cards, deal 2 additional damage, and you gain an ether. So once we start getting a mess of stuff in the discard pile, then we cast Solidia's Spark and we do a lot of damage. But anyway, now that will do it for Solidia. Now let's go take a look at the market. Here's our market for today. I've also got the dial for Gravehold. As we see, Gravehold is at 30 life, which is where it starts the game. If that gets depleted, we lose. But anyway, as you might recall from our game back in October, we also have to build the market with 3 gems, 2 relics, and 4 spells. So let's take a look at our gems first. We've got our nice and simple Jade, which does just gain 2 ether for two ether to buy. Next up, we have the Soothing Torporine for 3 ether, used to great success in the Aeon's End Legacy campaign. For 3 ether, you can either gain 2 ether or silence a minion when you play it. Then our last gem, we have the Phased Portalite for 4 ether. Gain 2 ether. If your 3 breach is opened, gain an additional 1. So that's worth 2 or 3 if you have your 3 breach open. Then our 2 relics. Scholar's Opus for 3 ether. Gain 1 charge. If there are 7 or more cards in your discard pile, gain 1 additional charge. So another way that we can help fly up on charges. Then we have the Reality Stabilizer for 6 ether. Gain 2 charges and silence a minion. So another way we can keep a minion at bay. Then our spells are a little bit on the pricey side, but that can't really be helped. We'll take a look first at another spell, a spell that we used to also immensely great effect that I've used to great effect in both of my Aeon's End Legacy campaigns. Bending Beam for 5 ether. Cast, deal 2 damage. If the spell was cast from an open 3 breach, deal 3 additional damage. So we're going to be looking to open our 3 breaches as fast as we can. Then we have a Forced Transfusion for 4 ether. Cast, deal 3 damage. And if you have 3 or more charges, gain 1 charge. Another spell that'll want our breaches open as fast as possible is Planar Insight for 6 ether. Deal 2 damage on cast plus 1 per open breach. So this can go up to a total of 7 damage for the 4 open breaches, and if we cast it from a plus 1 breach. And then last up, we have a simple Incinerating Fist for 4 ether to deal 3 damage. So, yeah, definitely want to get our breaches open as fast as we can. But anyway, that will do it for the market. Now let's move back up top and we'll get ready to start this game. We're just about ready to start the game. Before we do, I'll refresh everybody on how we determine the turns in this game. So what we have is what's known as a turn order deck. So we'll shuffle this up, give it a cut, and then we'll draw from this after each turn. Just to recall on how it's constructed, you see we've got 2 player 1s, 2 player 2s, and 2 Nemesis cards. So that'll indicate whoever's turn it is. With that, we'll go ahead and give this our first shuffle. And a cut, and we'll see that we're starting with player 1. So let's drop down and see what Nyrisia is getting up to. I do want to work on getting breaches open as fast as I can, so what we're going to do is we're going to focus Nyrisia, we're going to prep Nyrisia's Fury to her open 1 breach. Then I'm going to spend her 3 ether from her crystals to focus her 3 breach, since I want to get that open as fast as I can. And then because of Rage of the Sith, once per turn when I focus or open a breach, I get to deal 2 damage. I'll put that on... We'll put that right on the Carapace Queen, actually. So we'll get a jump on the damage that we're dealing to her. So we'll bring Carapace Queen down to 58. And then because we focused our 3 breach, I'm going to prep a spark to it. But remember, we'll have to cast that on the next casting phase. So we'll draw a fresh hand for Nyrisia. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we see we've got 3 crystals and 2 sparks. So let's go to the turn order deck and see that we find Nemesis. So let's move up and see what the Carapace Queen's doing for her first turn. The Nemesis turn would start off with the main phase of the turn where we'd resolve any persistent abilities for any minions that we have in play. But since we have no minions in play, we move right to the draw phase and draw a card from the Nemesis deck, where we draw Waylay, unleash twice. So that means we have to place 2 husks into play. So there are 2 husks in play. Now we're into the 4 to 6 part of the husk track. So if the Nemesis comes up again before Nyrisia, we lose her spell, and I don't want that to happen. So Gravehold also suffers 1 damage for each player turn order card in the turn order discard pile. So that's 1 damage to Gravehold. Which puts Gravehold at 29 health. So that's it for the turn, for the Nemesis turn. Let's see what we're drawing here. Player 1, perfect. So let's go back down to Nyrisia and see what she's doing. Okay, so we have to cast the spark on her casting phase. We'll deal with one of the husks in play just to get that off, so that Swarm isn't a problem. Then Nyrisia's Fury will go off. We'll throw that at another husk as well, because that's only 1 damage. Nyrisia also has 1 ether that we can only use to get a spell, but she does get her first charge. Then as we take a look at Nyrisia's hand coming out of that, we see we've got 3 crystals and 2 sparks. We'll immediately spend, so we have 3 to buy with, or 4 if we're getting a spell, but I don't think we are this round. So what I'm actually going to do is, how do I want to do this? 3 to get a spell, but my cheapest spell is 4. You know what? I think we are going to bite the bullet and get a spell here. So we're going to grab an Incinerating Fist for 3 damage. Actually, no. I'm not going to grab that spell because I need that 3 breach open right now. So I'm ultimately going to let that ether that I can only use to get a spell float away. But I'm going to go ahead and open Nyrisia's 3 breach, and we see we do have a +1 damage on cast. So any spell that I prep from here we'll have +1 damage dealt with it. Then we'll prep 2 sparks, and that will be it for Nyricia's turn. So remember, in Aeon's End, when you run out of cards in your discard, when you run out of a deck, you just flip your discard pile right over, and that becomes your new draw pile. Then we'll take a look here, and we see that Nyricia's got a lot of ether, but she's also got a spark and her fury back again. So anyway, now let's go over to the turn order deck and see who's up next. We find player 2. So we have Solidia's first turn of the game. Let's move over and see what she's doing. Solidia is going to take a similar strategy to what Nyricia did. She's going to prep her spark to her 1 breach. Then, unlike what Nyricia did, she's actually going to open her 2 breach outright. So we're going to pay the 3 ether cost on that to just open this 2 breach up. And then we'll prep the spark to it. That will be Solidia's turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we see, similarly, we have 3 crystals and 2 sparks. Then coming back to the turn order deck, we find player 2. So we're good. It's a good thing we're right here with Solidia. So we'll go ahead, cast the spark for 1. We'll hit the Carapace Queen with that, bringing her down to 57. Then we'll use Solidia's spark to hit Carapace Queen for another 1. But because we have 4 or more other cards in the discard pile, we actually get to hit for another 3. So that'll bring Carapace Queen down to 54. Then we'll prep her 2 sparks to her open breaches, and we've got 3 to buy with. 3 to buy with, I think, looks like a Soothing Torporine, especially since we don't have any minions in play right now that we need to silence. So anyway, once again, we'll flip this over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Take a look at her hand. We've got another run of her starting hand coming out of that turn. Crystals, Spark, and Solidia's Spark. And gee, I wonder what this card could be. Hey, look at that. It's a Nemesis Turn. So let's move up to Carapace Queen and see what she's doing. It is a good thing we did not have that Waylay coming up now, because Gravehold would be suffering 4 instead of the very survivable 1 that it took. But let's see what the Carapace Queen is doing right now. We have our first minion, Banesire. 6 health, Persistent, Unleash. So that's putting 2 husks into play. That thing's probably going to need to go pretty quick. Or we can probably hold it at bay using Solidia to silence it. So we'll get the 6 health out for that. And now with that being the end of our first run through the turn order deck, let's move back up top and take a look at the board state. We are definitely off to the races here, because each of our Magi has a second breach open. Nyricia's 3 is open, which is a +1 damage on cast. Solidia's is her 2 breach, but her 3 breach is probably going to be next on the agenda. They each have 2 sparks prepared to both of their open breaches. Nyricia's again being a +1 on cast. Looking at the Carapace Queen, we see from a distance it's maybe a little hard to see. I'll zoom in so maybe you can see it a little better. The angle is not the best in the world either, but that's kind of how things are set up on this table. We see that the Carapace Queen does have two husks in play right now, and the Banesire just came out, which is going to be 6 health and Unleash every time its Persistent goes off. So the question we have to figure out now is, do we take time off to kill that, or do we just try to ignore, or do we just try to hold it at bay with silencing? I think early in the game, I think we have to try to take it out. So I think that's going to be what we're going to do. We're going to try to take some damage off Carapace Queen to deal with that. Mostly because I don't... Well, there is an argument to be made, though, to just try to silence it for all time with Solidia. But no, I think the better play long-term is just to try to take it out, especially early game. Later game is probably when Solidia's Power Word Silence will come in more handy, when we just need to keep the minions at bay while we finish off the boss. But anyway, I think we're going to try to take out that Banesire. So We'll bring it back up. We'll go grab the Nemesis, the turn order deck. I'm hoping I'm not Freudian slipping there. Give it a fresh shuffle. And a cut. And we'll find... We're starting off with the Nemesis turn, so let's go up to the Carapace Queen. So on the main phase, we resolve Banesire's persistent ability, which is Unleash, and put 2 more Husks into play. And then coming out of the Nemesis deck, we find Endless Throng, Carapace Queen Swarms. So now we check the 4 to 6 effect. Any player discards a prepped spell and plays 2 Husks into play. That sucks. So Solidia will have to discard her Spark, and then we put 2 more Husks into play. So we're still in 4 to 6 land. Which also means now we need to start watching out for the Husks. But anyway, our next card from the turn order deck, I was about to reach for the Nemesis deck, but we don't know what... Actually, I probably wasn't too far off the mark in reaching for the Nemesis deck. But we unleash and put 2 more Husks into play. So now we have Gravehold suffering 5 damage if we swarm. But we find... Place a Husk into play for each turn order card in the turn order discard pile. That's another 2. Yikes. So we are flying through. We're probably going to have to take out some of these Husks too. So we're at 10 Husks in play right now, which means next time Carapace Queen swarms, Gravehold suffers 5 damage. Fortunately, though, Carapace Queen will not be up again for this run through the turn order deck. In fact, we find player 2, so let's go down and see what Solidia is doing. Spark is going to put 1 damage on the Banesire because I'm planning on Nyrisia being able to take that out on her next turn. Then we'll prepare Solidia's Spark to her 1, regular Spark to her 2, and we've got 3 to buy with. And I think 3 to buy with will be... another Soothing Torporine. So we'll move that to our discard pile. Put the Sparks in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Unfortunately, we are flipping Solidia's discard pile right now, which basically turns off Solidia's Spark. But we see that we've got a pretty sizable Ether turn coming out of this. So I'll probably use Solidia on Spark, on a Husk detail, I should say. Next turn order card we have is player 1, so let's move over to Nyrisia. We'll put 3 damage on the Banesire with both of these Sparks, so that'll bring the Banesire down to 2. And then we'll prep Nyrisia's Fury to her 2 breach, or 3 breach, Spark to her 1, and she's got 3 to buy with, which will actually go into... you know what I think we're going to do? I think we're going to focus her 2 breach for 2, which once per turn from Rage of the Sith, when you focus or open a breach, deal 2 damage. That will take the Carapace, or the Banesire out. I wish it was taking out the Carapace Queen. And then we'll discard a crystal to Dark Blessing to deal 1 damage and take out one of these Husks. And then we'll move everything to the discard pile. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoop! What the... Oh, Banesire into Nyrisia's discard pile. No, that should be in the Nemesis discard pile. And looking here, we see we've got a bunch of crystals and a couple Sparks. Anyway, let's see what we're getting next in the turn order deck. We find player 1, so we're right here with Nyrisia. Alright, so we'll Spark a Husk down. And then what do I want to do with Nyrisia's Fury? Would I rather stay at 7 to 10, or do I want to move up to 4 to 6? I think staying at 7 to 10 is actually fine right now, so we'll put 2 damage onto Carapace Queen, bringing her down to 52, and we'll gain a charge from that, so that'll bring Nyrisia up to 2. Looking at her turn, We'll prep Spark to a 3 breach. We'll prep both of her Sparks. Then I'll spend her 2 crystals, or spend 2 ether to open this breach, and we'll put 2 more damage on the Carapace Queen from Rage of the Sith, bringing Carapace Queen down to 50. And then we'll discard a crystal to her Dark Blessing to take out another husk. So just to try to get those a little bit under control. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Taking a look at Nyrisia's hand. We get 3 crystals, a Spark, and her Fury back once again. And gee, I wonder what we've got in the turn order deck left. It's player 2, so let's go say hello to Solidia once again. Hello, Solidia. Now that right now we don't have a source of husks going into play, now I think I'm fine starting to put some damage on Carapace Queen. So we'll hit Carapace Queen with both of these for 2, bringing her down to 48. Then we see we've got 5 ether to buy with and a Spark. So we'll prep the Spark. And then I'll go ahead and open her 3 breach outright. As we see here, it's another +1 damage on cast. So we'll move all of that over to her discard pile, stacking it like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We see we've got another turn like we had before. Now anyway, let's move back up top and we'll see how the board state's changed now that we're through the turn order deck once again. Both of our mages' 3 breaches are open, so now this is where the game really starts to open up for us. Now Bending Beam becomes more interesting, the Phased Portalite becomes more interesting, but we still need to build up our ether in this deck a little more, I think. Moving up to the Carapace Queen, we took out the Banesire, but we still have 7 husks in play, so swarming right now isn't too big a concern, especially now that we don't have a steady Unleash right now because we took the Banesire out. But anyway, let's grab the turn order deck, turn order discard pile, make it into a new deck. We'll give this a shuffle and a cut, and we start off with player 2. So let's go say hello to Solidia. I don't want to start killing husks until I can get clear of the 4 to 6 effect on Swarm. So I think we'll just keep chipping away at the Carapace Queen with another Spark for 1 to bring her down to 47. Then as we take a look at her hand, we'll prep a Spark to her 3 breach, and then we've got 5 ether to buy with, or 3 if we silence a minion. But since we have no minion in play, I think 5 ether looks like our first Bending Beam, so we're going to see how powerful that ends up being. Move everything to the discard pile, flip it over, and draw a new hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we got a decent amount of ether coming out. And Vengeful Shadows hasn't been active yet, I would have noticed that. But anyway, coming out of the turn order deck, we have player 2. So, like the Nemesis last round, Solidia won't go again until we get through the turn order deck. So we'll spark the Carapace Queen right now for 2, because that was cast from a 3 breach. 45. Then we'll prep the Solidia Spark to her 3 breach, a regular Spark to her 2 breach, and we've got 4 to buy with. 4 to buy with would focus the 4 breach, but I really now want to start getting my ether generation up a little bit more. So I'll go ahead and grab our first Phased Portalite of the game. Remember, if the 3 breach is open, which for both of our Magi it is, that'll be worth 3 ether when it comes up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we got a decent amount of ether and our first Bending Beam coming out. So now we go to the turn order deck. Spoiler alert, this won't be Solidia coming up. It's Nyrisia, so let's go say hello to Nyrisia. Nyrisia will start her turn off with a bang with another 3 damage on the Carapace Queen to go up to bring her down to 42. There's a quick look at that. And as we look at her hand, we'll prep Nyricia's Fury to 3, Spark to 2, and we've got 3 to buy with, which I think will be a Torporine for Nyricia. Actually, better idea. It'll be a Jade for Nyricia, and then we'll discard a Crystal to deal another damage to the Carapace. Actually, yeah, we'll deal another damage to the Carapace Queen. Again, when we swarm, that brings Carapace Queen down to 41. Again, when we swarm, I'd rather have Gravehold suffer 5 damage than have to discard a prepped spell, even though it could just be a spark. But anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looking here, we've got 3 sparks and 2 crystals, or 3 crystals and 2 sparks. Let's get that in the right order. Then in the turn order deck, we find player 1. So we have 2 Nemesis cards coming out. Anyway, we'll start off with 3 damage because we're casting Nyricia's Fury from a 3 breach. So that'll bring Carapace Queen down to 38. So 38. And I have an ether that I can only use to get a spell. So we'll go ahead and prep sparks to her 2 and 3 breaches. Then I've got 3, 4 if I want to get a spell, and I think I do. I think I'm going to grab another Force Transfusion. I also have to remember that Nyricia gets a charge, so we'll get that for her. Alright, so we'll move those to the discard pile. 1, 2, 3, 4, and turn that over 5. And we see we've got Nyricia's Fury back again, and we've got a decent amount of ether. Gee, I wonder what we've got coming out of the turn order deck here. Hey, look at that, it's a Nemesis card. So let's move up to the Carapace Queen for the next 2 turns. We have no persistent cards in play right now, so we just go straight to the Nemesis deck. We find Slaughter, Unleash, and Gravehold suffers 3 damage. So that keeps us in 7 to 10, but we're gonna have to knock some of these husks down on next time we have a chance. Gravehold suffers another 3 damage, which will bring Gravehold down to 26. And I won't bother revealing it on camera because I already know it's a Nemesis card. Once again, no persistent cards, but we find Broodwomb, 5 health. If there's at least 1 husk in play, prevent all damage dealt to this minion. Persistent, place a husk in play. Yikes. Okay, so we're not touching that thing until we get all those husks out of play. But anyway, let's move back. Now that we're through the Nemesis turn, the turn order deck again. I'll say it right one of these times. Now that we're through the turn order deck, there we go. Let's move back up top to see how the board's changed. Okay, the board state hasn't really changed too much in terms of our Magi. We've just been largely working Carapace Queen down. Right now, Nyricia's got sparks prepped to her 2 and 3 breaches. Solidia's got a regular spark and her spark prepped to her breaches. And we just drew hands again. Looking at the Carapace Queen, we see that the Carapace Queen does have 9 husks in play right now. And we've got a minion here that's going to put another one into play every turn. So now there might be an argument to try to start silencing the minion and just racing Carapace Queen down, unless we can take out all of those husks in a couple turns so we can get Broodwomb down quickly. I'm also going to mention that I normally would put the 5 health token on Broodwomb, but because we have so many husks in play right now, I'm not going to bother with that until I get rid of all of those husks, which we actually might have to now. I'll have to give that a little bit of thought, but anyway. Now let's grab the turn order deck up once again. Give it a shuffle. And a cut. And we find We're starting with player 1, so let's move over to Nyrisia. There's also an argument to be made to just start racing at this point, but I don't think we have enough firepower to do that, so I think we're going to play it a little bit safer. Anyway, we'll spark one of the husks down. Then I'm going to cast the spark, but I'm going to deal it damage so I can divide it among multiple husks, since I'm going to be dealing damage to a husk. So I'll use the spark from the 3 breach to take out 2 husks. Then as I look at Nyrisia's hand, we'll prep her Fury to her 3 breach. Then I've got 5 to buy with, or potentially damage if I want it, but I think what I want actually is I want to get Nyrisia a Bending Beam as well. So we're going to put that into her deck for 5. Then we'll draw this, then we'll draw her hand back up for 5. And we see we're going to be able to start doing some damage here. But we're going over to the turn order deck. Let's see what we find here. We find player 1 again, so we're still with Nyrisia. Alright, so I think we are going to try to work those husks down and get them under a little bit more control. So we'll take another damage to deal 2 damage to a pair of husks. We've got another 1 that we can only use to get a spell, and Nyrisia gets her 4th charge. Then as we prep spells here, so once again, Nyrisia is not going again until we get out of the turn order deck. So we'll prep a Force Transfusion to her 3 breach, a spark to her 2, and we've got 3 to buy with. But I think I'm going to discard, to her Dark Blessing, I'm going to discard a crystal to deal a damage to another husk, just to get us out of 4 to 6. And then the last 2 will be to buy a Jade. Then we'll turn this over, draw a fresh hand, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we see Nyrisia is going to start doing a lot of damage here. Anyway, going back to the turn order deck, we find Nemesis. So let's move up to the Nemesis. Persistent effect on Broodwomb first puts another Husk token into play. So we're back into 4 to 6 territory if Carapace Queen swarms. But let's see what we draw here. We draw Unleash twice. The way this is worded, this is actually a card from the Legacy game. If the way this works is, if the player that's named on this card is in play, that player suffers the damage. If not, then any player suffers it. So we unleash twice and basically lose all that work that we did getting the husks under control. So 1, 2, 3, 4... And then we'll actually target Solidia with that. So Solidia will suffer the 3 damage from Marked. So if I can ever get the 3 damage off, there we go. Yowza. So that brought Swarming right back to being something I didn't want to see. But anyway, let's go back to the turn order deck. We find Nemesis again. So we know we've got the next 2 turns being Solidia's. So we put another husk into play and basically undo everything that we just did there. That's moderately annoying. And then we draw Crushing Wave. Yikes. So to discard, spend 8 ether. Power 2, unleash twice. If Gravehold has 15 or more life, Gravehold suffers 6 damage. Let me bring this up here so we can see it. Power 2, unleash twice. If Gravehold has 15 life or more, Gravehold suffers 6 damage. Otherwise, any player suffers 4 damage. Yowza. We're not going to be able to deal with that most likely here, but we are in stage 2. So, yeah, at least on the bright side, we know the Nemesis isn't going again until we get through the turn order deck. So, just to not bother with suspense, we'll see that both the next 2 cards are player 2 cards, so Solidia will be taking the next 2 turns. There's a definite argument to be made to start getting ready to race, and we might have to. Because that Crushing Wave, we're not going to be able to deal with that most likely. So, I'm getting a little ahead of myself there, though. So I think we'll put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll hit the spark first, and we'll deal 4 damage. We'll put it right on the Carapace Queen, bringing Carapace Queen down to 34. Then we'll spark a husk down. And now looking at Solidia's hand, we'll prep the Bending Beam to her 3 breach, Spark to her 2 breach, and we've got 4 to buy with, except I'm going to discard a crystal to Power Word Silence. Grab a Silence token out over here. And we'll silence Broodwomb to put paid to his Persistent ability the first time he comes out. And then 3 to buy with, I think, will be another Soothing Torporine. So we'll stack it. We'll stack it like that, including the Torporine I just bought. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we see that for Solidia's hand. That's 3, 5, 6, 7. So we're going to be 1 short trying to deal with the Crushing Wave, but it is Solidia's turn again, because remember we had 2... That was the first of her turns, because we had 2 player 2s come up in the turn order deck. So we'll spark the Carapace Queen for... Actually, we'll spark a Husk down. Then... take 1 damage, take out 6 of those Husks. Seems good. Yeah, I think we'll do that. I think we'll take 1 damage and to take out 6 of these Husks. The reason I'm able to do that is because I'm casting Bending Beam for 2 damage from a +1 breach, which is a 3 breach. So we're dealing 3 additional damage, so we're doing a total of 6 damage. 1 damage to take out 6 Husks. Then we'll prep that, prep the Spark to her 3 breach, and then we've got 7 to buy with. Well, I think that's another Bending Beam and a charge. That's actually not a Bending Beam yet. That is... I do want to start getting as much damage as I can, though. I think that actually is focusing my 4 breach, and for the last 3, it's another Soothing Torporine. So we'll stack it like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, we got a decent amount of ether coming out and some spells. Which reminds me, Solidia actually... I think she did cast 2 spells that round. I'll go back and check the footage on that, but I'm not sure if she did cast 2 spells or not. So she actually, I think, well, the one ether ultimately won't matter. But anyway, now that we're down to Solidia's turn, now let's move back up top, and we'll see how the board state's changed. Alright, so we used the Bending Beam for the first time to take out a bunch of Husks, but I'm getting ahead of myself there. So Nyrisia's got a Force Transfusion prepped to her 3 breach. She's almost ready to use her ability, and a Spark prepped to her 2 breach. Solidia is nowhere near her special ability with a Spark prepped to her 3 breach. Looking at Carapace Queen, we see that the Broodwomb has been silenced. Solidia is going to try to hold that at bay. We also got Crushing Wave out that we're probably not going to get anywhere near the ether to deal with that. And we're down to 1 Husk in play right now. So if we can take out that last Husk, we can start putting damage on the Broodwomb. But anyway, let's grab the turn order deck. And we'll see where we're going with that. And we start off this run with the Nemesis. So let's move up to Carapace Queen. The Silence token comes off with Brood Womb, but his persistent effect does not go off. Crushing Wave ticks down. And then from the Nemesis deck we draw Blot the Sun. To discard, lose 4 charges. Power 2. Carapace Queen swarms. Then unleash, then Carapace Queen swarms again. Yikes. So basically we swarm, then we unleash, then we swarm again. That could be very dangerous, which, again, there might be an argument to start racing, but we find, from the turn order deck, next we find Player 2, so let's go see what Solidia is doing. We'll spark the last husk down. That way, if Nyrisia comes up before the Nemesis comes up again, we can take out Brood Womb. Anyway, we'll prep Solidia's Spark to her 3 breach, regular Spark to her 2 breach, and I've got 4 ether worth of stuff left in my hand. Now, the only problem here is I'm about to flip my discard pile over, so Solidia's Spark is going to get turned off. But so I think we'll just discard a crystal to keep Brood Womb silenced. That way, even if the Nemesis comes up before Nyrisia again, we still will be able to take out Brood Womb. And then 3 to buy with, I think looks like a Scholar's Opus. So we'll stack it like that. We'll put the Opus on the bottom. Torporine, and then the crystal. Then we'll draw back up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we see we're going to be doing a lot of damage here pretty quickly. Anyway, next up from the turn order deck we have Player 2 again, so Solidia. Alright, so with all that mentioned, we'll start working on Carapace Queen. So we'll hit her for a total of 3 damage, bringing her down to 31. And then we did cast 2 spells, so Vengeful Shadows goes off. So we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll prep a Bending Beam to her 3 breach, and a Spark to her 2 breach. We've got 5 to buy with, which I think will be 5 ether will be, and will be a Soothing Torporine and a Charge, even though I don't think we're using Solidia's special ability in this game. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We see that we've got a lot of ether, but unfortunately Solidia is not going to come up again, so we're not going to be able to stop the crushing wave from going off. But anyway, next up we find Player 1, so let's move over to Nyrisia. Alright, so we'll start off with the Force Transfusion, and we will hit Brood Womb for 4 and give her a charge. And then we'll hit Brood Womb with the Spark and finish that off. Now the question is, do I lose the 4 charges to prevent Blot the Sun from going off, or do we just race? We might be better off trying to race at this point. So I'll go ahead, we'll prep the Bending Beam to her 2 breach, or to her 3 breach, Sparks to her 2 and 1, and I've got 3 to buy with. Actually, what I think I'll do is I'll discard a crystal to do 2 damage to the Carapace Queen, bringing her down to 29. Now I think at this point we do want to start putting as much... Let me look at... that gets me that back. Yeah, I think we buy the last charge. So Nyrisia's special ability is ready to go. The question is, do I stop Blot the Sun, or do I just start racing? Because Netherlord's Wrath casts any player's prep spell without discarding it. Gravehold's still at plenty of life, so Crushing Wave isn't a big problem. We've only got one more Nemesis Turn in the turn order discard a Nemesis Turn left in this run of the turn order deck. So the question is, well, we're at zero husks right now, so we're not actually in danger really of anything dangerous on the swarm front happening. Actually, I take that back because we're going to be unleashing twice, which will put 4 husks into play. I think we gamble, though. I think we try it. So, I think the spell... I think what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and use... Swarm... Okay, wait a minute. Let me think about this. So, Unleash twice puts 4 husks in play. Then if we swarm, any player discards a prep spell, then we unleash, then if we discard another prep spell, I think the better idea actually is to use the lose the 4 charges to stop Blot the Sun from going off. I figured there would be a chance that we'd race, but I'd rather play it safe. I can deal with Crushing Wave right now. So I think that's how we do that. Then we'll draw back up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We see that we've got a big ether, a decently big ether turn coming up. But let's see what we get out of the turn order deck next. We get player 1, so it's a good thing we're right here with Nyrisia. Alright, so Bending Beam will deal 3 damage, plus an additional 3 because we're casting it from an open 3 breach, so 6, 7, 8 damage to Carapace Queen, bringing her down 21. And then looking at her hand, we'll go ahead and prep a Nyrisia's Fury to her 3 breach, and we've got 5 to buy with. Actually, I'll discard a crystal to do 2 more damage to the Carapace, to 1 damage to the Carapace Queen, bringing her down to 20. And then I'll focus her 4 breach, which will do another 2 damage to the Carapace Queen, bringing her down to 18. Then we'll start drawing back up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So looking at her hand, we've got more damage coming. And then, gee, I wonder what this is in the turn order deck. Hey, look at that Nemesis. So let's move up to the Nemesis. Crushing Wave goes off, and there was nothing we could do to stop that. So we unleash twice, which puts 4 husks into play. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then Gravehold is still at 26 life, so Gravehold goes down to 20. And then we draw out of the Nemesis deck we find Venomite, 9 health. Persistent, the player with the lowest life suffers 2 damage, or any player discards a prepped spell that costs 3 damage or more. So we'll get the 9 health out for Venomite. 7, 8, 9. Alright, that's all set up. So now that we're through the turn order deck once again, let's move back up top and see how the board's changed. Three breaches are still open. Nyrisia has 2 charges and Nyrisia's Fury prepped to her 3 breach. Nyrisia is at 8 health. Solidia is at 6 health right now. She's got a Spark prepared to her 2 breach, a Bending Beam to her 3 breach, and 1 charge. Moving up to the Carapace Queen, we see the Venomite is now in play with 9 health. A not really obnoxious persistent effect right now. But Carapace Queen does have 4 husks in play, and Carapace Queen is at 18 health to Gravehold's 20. So I think the plan right now is probably going to be to try to kill the Carapace Queen as fast as we can. So let's grab the turn order deck. The plan here is going to be to kill the Carapace Queen as fast as we can and hold the Venomite at bay. We'll cut and we'll start off. Well, that's not an encouraging start. We're starting with the Nemesis, so let's move up to the Carapace Queen. Venomite's persistent. Player with the lowest life suffers 2 damage, so Solidia will suffer 2 damage. And then fresh from the Nemesis deck we find Infest. Either Carapace Queen swarms twice or any player suffers 4 damage. Basically that amounts to discard a prepped spell, discard 2 prepped spells and place 4 husks into play. I think Nyrisia will suffer 4 damage from that. She's at 8 health right now. So we need to be careful about that. Anyway, next in the turn order deck we find Nemesis again. So the only consolation here is that the Nemesis won't be going again, and we have 4 turns basically to take the Nemesis out. So the persistent effect goes off again, which means Nyrisia will take that damage this time. And then from the Nemesis deck we find Foul Multitudes. Husks have 2 life. Damaged husks heal to full life at the end of each turn. Immediately unleash. Power 3, Carapace Queen swarms. Well, it's a good thing we're ignoring the husks at this point. We're probably even ignoring Venomite at this point. But we also unleash, so we put 2 more husks into play, which brings us up to 6 husks in play. Right. So now our goal just became more clear than ever. Kill the Carapace Queen before she kills us. Fortunately, like I said, the Nemesis has already gone twice on this run through the turn order deck. So now it's only player turns. And this is basically what we've got to kill Carapace Queen basically free of charge. Free of retaliation, I should say. Anyway, let's get started on that with Solidia. So we'll drop down to her play area. We'll go ahead and point 7 damage straight away at Carapace Queen's face. 6 from a Bending Beam on a 3 breach, and 1 from a Spark. So that'll bring Carapace Queen down to 11. And then we'll take a look at Solidia's hand. And we'll see she's got a bunch of ether, some of which I could use to silence that Venomite, but I don't think I'm going to need to. So for 8 ether, what do we do? That could just open her 7 breach outright, or her 4 breach outright, but actually we do have 8 ether. Actually we have 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 10 ether actually. Help if I could do first grade math right. So 7 of which will open her 4 breach outright, which as we see is another +1 damage on cast. Then for 3, we'll grab another Scholar's Opus. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, next up from the turn order deck we have Player 2, so both of our next turns will be Nyrisia. Anyway, we'll go ahead and prepare a Spark to a 4 breach. Scholar's Opus to give her 2 charges because she gets 1 charge and she's definitely got 7 or more cards in her discard pile just for formality. 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yes, so Solidia gains 2 charges. And then she will for 4, I think she'll get a Force Transfusion. Then we'll move this all over to 3, 4, 5. Unfortunately, that'll make Nyrisia's ability a lot less useful. And then once again, just to avoid the drama, we'll see that we have 2 player 1 cards in the turn order discard pile. So we'll move over to Nyrisia. We'll start off by hitting the Carapace Queen for 2 with Nyrisia's Fury, which will bring Carapace Queen down to 9. Then we will prep a Force Transfusion to her 3 breach, a Spark to her 2 breach. I've got 3 to buy with, but I'll discard 1 to deal 1 damage to Carapace Queen. That'll bring her down to 8, and then I'll use these to get another charge. And that moved everything over to the discard pile. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was Nyrisia's first turn. Her second turn, I think we just win. Well, I don't think we quite just win the game. We're going to come very close, though. But I will hit Carapace Queen with a Force Transfusion for 4, bringing her down to 4. I have 4. Then a Spark, then Spark it again to bring her down to 3. Then we'll prep Bending Beam to her 3 breach. Spark to her 2. No, I don't. Actually, we do get a charge from Force Transfusion as well, but I think we're going to come up 1 short for what I was trying to do. Spark to her 1 breach. I'll discard a crystal to hit Carapace Queen for another 1, bringing her down to 2. And we'll use the 2 Jade to get her 5th charge. And then that's it for Nyrisia. For 5. Take a look at her hand, not that it's really going to matter. And then we'll move back up top to see how the board state's changed. We're going to win the game on the first player turn that comes up from this run through the Nemesis, through the turn order deck. Because we have got all kinds of spells prepped ready to go here. Nyrisia's got 2 Sparks and a Bending Beam prepped, and Solidia's got a Spark on a 4 breach. So we've got more than enough damage to take out the Carapace Queen. Looking up at the Carapace Queen, we see that we have 6 Husks in play. Venomite's been untouched because we were trying to race the Carapace Queen. Foul Multitudes hasn't ticked down because that came out on the second turn of on the second Nemesis turn on this run through the deck. But we have 6 Husks in play. So, let's see if we can finish the game on this, starting a new run through the turn order deck. And we'll start off with player 2, so let's drop down to Solidia. In the casting phase, the Spark from the 4 breach takes out the Carapace Queen, which brings the Carapace Queen down to 0, and we have won the game. So with that, let's move back up top to wrap this video up. That was a close one. We definitely started getting beat up there towards the end a little bit. If I wouldn't have been able to kill the Carapace Queen right there, I probably would have silenced the Venomite so it didn't take Nyrisia out on her next turn. But just out of curiosity, let's see what the next turn would have been. It would have been Nyrisia, so the Carapace Queen was screwed either way. But anyway, we have won this game of Aeon's End today. So that will do it for this playthrough of Aeon's End. Next week, we'll step back briefly into the Cthulhu mythos as we play Cthulhu, Death May Die. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care everyone.